Maps. They can help you find your house, get from point A to point B, or even discover buried treasure. Maps tell us about the cities, countries, and regions that they cover, and even the people that live there. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and if that's the case, we think a map must be worth at least 10,000. That's why today we gathered a collection of maps that tell us a lot more about Denmark than just its borders and city locations. Enjoy this video of 9 maps that tell the real story of Denmark. Now, Copenhagen is certainly an old city, having just celebrated its 850th birthday in 2017. And like most European cities, Copenhagen features a medieval core with winding roads, but Copenhagen was actually one of the last major cities to tear down their walls. And you can see their legacy today in places like Øster, Nord, Vesta, and Søndervølgade, all streets running along where the walls used to be. And the train stations at Østerport, Nordport, Vesterport, they all mark the former gates into the city. I also find it interesting how different the harborfront looks just under 200 years ago. It reminds you how much of the city land is actually man-made. And most fun, you can already see the infant Tivoli Gardens in this map. It's the open land that used to be part of the defensive walls. They were torn down and then made room for Tivoli.
It may seem odd that Copenhagen sits on the edge of modern Denmark, but in truth, it used to actually be central to Denmark proper. This is because Denmark extended well into Scania, which is now part of southern Sweden, and they also had extensive territory along the Baltic coast. The era of this map could be said was the peak of Danish power. It was the same period as Christian IV, or Christian the Builder, who built Rosenborg Castle. He built the harbor at Christianshavn in Copenhagen, and even had a whole bunch of cities around his empire named after himself. An example of this being what we now call Oslo, that used to be called Christiania after him.
As Denmark ceded much of the Baltic to Sweden after the wars of the 17th century, its realm looked to expand across the globe. It might even surprise you that there was actually a global Danish empire, and you can still see the influence of this today. Some parts of the empire remain, such as the Faroe Islands and Greenland, which are still part of the Danish realm. And you may know that Norway was also once part of Denmark, up until the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Still, relations remain strong today, and they were strong enough that when Norway needed a new king, they actually chose a Danish prince. And Iceland was also part of the realm until they declared full independence during World War II. But the empire reached farther. A seafaring nation, Denmark set up fortresses along the Gold Coast of Africa and along the coast of India. In some places, fortresses remain, but little more is found there. The Nicobar Islands were also fully a part of the empire, but these were lost to the British and now India, with little remaining to show. But did you know that before Donald Trump tried to buy Greenland, Denmark sold other islands to the United States? That's right, the US Virgin Islands used to be the Danish Virgin Islands until they were sold in 1917. Partly as Denmark needed funds during World War I, and also to avoid them falling into German hands if the Germans decided to invade Denmark during the First World War. You can still see the Danish influence in the islands, as the local language still uses many Danish words and phrases, and the capital city is named Charlotte Amalie, which is named for the Queen of Christian V.
If you ask most people around the world about the Second Schleswig War, you're probably going to get a curious look, unless that person is a Dane. Much like 1776 in the USA or 1066 in England, the year 1864 is probably the most impactful in Danish history. This map shows why. Clearly, there is a huge impact to losing Scania in Sweden during the 1600s, but that was a period before nation-states really existed. And the loss of Norway after the Napoleonic Wars certainly hurt as well, but at that time Norway was an economic backwater, populated by people who spoke a different language, so it wasn't like losing a part of Denmark proper. But 1864 was different. Denmark was a full nation state with a national identity and a view that even if they weren't a world power, they were at least pretty important on Europe itself. But then, after being routed by the Prussians in 1864, a full quarter of the country and population was gone. Moved behind a border and now living under a country that was actively de-Danishing them rather than treating them as an ethnic minority. In recent Danish history, there really is a before and after 1864. After 1864, Denmark no longer saw itself as a European power and really looked inward with a deeper focus on nationalism, growing their economy through agriculture, and honestly repeating from global affairs. This was also a period of outward migration, as ethnic Danes were now living in Prussia or Germany and facing a collapsed economy in Jutland, and many of them left for America. On the positive side, losing such valuable territory led to a bit of a reluctance to trade with Germany, opening to a focus on agriculture and trade, particularly with Britain. This experience also led the country to avoid alliances and helped keep it neutral during World War I, and they tried practicing in World War II as well.
There are approximately 1.3 million Americans that have Danish origin or descent, which is pretty crazy when you consider there are less than 6 million Danes living in Denmark. Many of those American descendants are descendants of Danes that immigrated to the United States between 1860 and 1930. The greatest Danish immigration occurred in 1882 when 11,600 Danes settled in the United States. The first significant wave of Danish immigration consisted of members of the Mormon or LDS Church. They settled in the newly acquired state of Utah, which had been under Mexican control until 1848. These first Danish immigrants numbered 17,000, and they settled in small farming communities in the St. Pete and Sevier counties of Utah. Today, these counties respectively have the second and fifth largest percentage of Danish Americans in the United States, as you can see on the map here. Between 1864 and 1920, another 50,000 Danes emigrated from Schleswig, where the use of the Danish language was banned in schools following Denmark's loss in the Second Schleswig War. Now, most of these Danish immigrants were recorded in census statistics as immigrants from Germany rather than from Denmark, but they knew who they were, and they maintained their Danish culture. After 1865, Danish immigrants to America mostly moved there for economic reasons. By 1865, there had been a large increase in the Danish population in Europe because of improvements in both medicine and the food industry. This rapid population growth caused a high rate of poverty and a significant increase in Danish migration to other countries. Another reason for immigration was the availability of agricultural lands. Many Danes that came to the United States during this period bought cheap land to settle the Midwest, and they became farmers in the United States. These Danish immigrants were instrumental in the settlement of the American frontier, and many of these Danish communities are still found in this region of the U.S. today, as you can see on the map. Danish-American ties are still preserved to this day, and one of the best ways to experience that close relationship is with the annual REBILD festival. It's the largest July 4th celebration outside of the United States, and it occurs in Denmark every year. This year is the 110th anniversary of the event, and the guest of honor is Her Majesty the Queen. It's an incredible event and features great music and speeches from government leaders, ambassadors of both countries, and this year will also feature the Danish rock star Jakob Dinesen, hope I'm saying that right, and the Kentucky bluegrass band, the Kelly Caldwell Band, and the actor Casper Philipsen, who played JFK in the movie Jackie. Mike and I attended last year, and we had an incredible time celebrating July 4th and Danish-American friendship. I never thought that we'd actually celebrate July 4th in such a great way now that we're living in Denmark, but this festival is incredible, and we have information in the description if you're interested. We highly recommend that you go. It's fantastic for both Danes and Americans.
Remember 2 maps ago, that map of Denmark from 1864? Obviously, Denmark doesn't look like that anymore, and the reason why is this map here. The Schleswig-Holstein referenda of 1920. In this referendum, the territories of Schleswig-Holstein were broken into 3 sections with the intent to have a plebiscite to allow residents to determine what country they wanted to live in. Here you can see the distinct results between the northern Schleswig and southern Schleswig areas. You can also see the pockets of Danish voters that are in what's now Germany, and probably more distinctly, the pockets of German voters in what is now Denmark. This has resulted in special rules for ethnic minorities in each country, ensuring that the cleansing efforts of the 19th century are not repeated. I guess they don't want to see another protest pig. This also led to another seminal moment in Danish history, which is the Easter Crisis of 1920. Despite the results of the plebiscite clearly showing that the more southern territory Schleswig didn't want to join Denmark, King Christian X and other nationalist politicians believed that Denmark should just take all of it back. The ruling Social Democrats wanted to comply with the results, and the king did not accept this. Inevitably, the king dismissed the government, a power he actually still had in the Constitution at that time. He replaced the government with a favorable caretaker who shared his views. The Danish people were generally not supportive of this royal power grab, and protesters filled the streets of Copenhagen. Eventually, the king had to back down, and he accepted the fact that both the results had to be accepted and that his position now as king was a purely ceremonial head of state, something it still is today.
So popular referenda are still a major part of Danish democracy today, especially when it comes to the various changes within the European Economic Community and the European Union. First, you see the 1973 referendum to join the EEC, the forerunner to the EU, and then the failed Maastricht Treaty vote that occurred in 1992. The most interesting part of these maps to me is about the areas that voted most strongly against European integration. The population centers like Copenhagen and Aarhus were the ones that voted against the EU. As now, left-wing parties tend to dominate in the cities, but at the time, these left-wing parties were those most against the EEC and the EU. Today, you can see in more recent votes that this is flipped, as the cities have become the centers of support for the EU. The prior urban opposition to the European project might be a bit of a surprise, particularly as Brexit seemed to pit the Remain cities against the Leave rural areas. But this makes sense, as core opposition in the past came from the left-wing parties that saw the EU as a threat to workers. Today, as in the most recent referendum on the EU defense carve-out that Denmark has, only the farthest left Enhedslisten party opposed this change, partnered with the right-wing nationalist Dansk Folkeparti and Nye Borgerlige parties, showing that center-left parties are now just as committed to the European project as their center-right counterparts are.
Shifting gears from political history, it's important to understand the economic foundation of Denmark as well. Denmark's become a world leader in wind power technology, with companies like Vestas and days where wind power provides more than 100% of Danish electricity becoming quite common. This map shows why. Wind is king in Denmark because of how much wind power potential there is across the area. This map shows wind power potential across all of Europe, and as you see this map, and especially the parts of Jutland that have extreme wind possibility, you can see why Denmark's a leader in wind.
And we just had to find a map about pigs. Did you know that Denmark is a leader in agriculture as well? In fact, 63% of Denmark's land is dedicated to agriculture. That's the highest percent in the entire world. Coming from the US, we tend to think of agriculture as amber waves of grain that extend across all of Iowa and Nebraska. But the truth is, Denmark is a giant farm with a few big cities in between. And you can see this on a map of European pig production. There are actually more than 3 times more pigs than people living in Denmark, and that is shown on these maps. Agriculture is still a major part of the Danish economy, as it's a net exporter of food. Danish Crown is Europe's largest pork producer, and other agricultural brands like Arla and Lørpack are famous around the world. Now, next up, you can check out our experience from REBILD Festival with this video here. And if you want to know more about pigs, you can check out our video, 5 Reasons Not to Mess with Denmark, where we'll tell you about one pig in particular that you'll want to learn about. And don't forget, the description of the REBILD Festival and links for getting tickets are in the video description below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hi.